Hello, everybody. We're going to wait 1 minute until everybody gets on and we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. There's a few more people jumping in. But hello, everyone. I am Sierra Royster. I am the Director of Innovation at April, which is the Associations of Programs for Rural Independent Living. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. It's scary or not scary, considering it's Halloween, understanding the HCBS settings rule. So a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We do have a webinar platform today. So when you scroll over that menu bar, depending on what device you are on, that menu bar could be at the top or the bottom of your screen. That is where you'll find the closed captioning for today's session. You can view those captionings by selecting that CC tab on that menu bar. We also have a sign language interpreter that can be found just directly on the screen. If you would like to change the size of the screen once the slides are shown, you can do that by selecting the line in the middle of this screen that will slide to the right or left to make the slides or the interpreter larger or smaller. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat feature for that today. You can use the word bubble in that same menu bar. If you would like to turn the chat feature off, if you are using a screen reader, you can do that by pressing Alt-H. Or please use the info and help section on the conference website, or excuse me, the April website for more information if you need it. And I will also drop my email into that chat as well if you would like to contact me if you would like to contact me with the technical issues. We will have question and answer time at the end of today. Please note the question and answer box is on the menu bar. And so if you have something that you want to make sure gets asked in there, go ahead and drop that throughout the time and we'll review those at the end. We will have, during that same question and answer time, you'll have the option to raise hands. And so I can unmute you at that point. And then you can press *9 or Alt-Y on your keypad to either raise hand and then *6 to unmute or Alt-A if using keystrokes. And once you join, please just remember to keep the conversation and background noise down so we can hear you as clearly as possible. Okay. So thank you. That's all the housekeeping items. But please let me know if you need anything throughout. I am going to go ahead and start the screen sharing so you can see our slides for today. Okay. So first off, we have several of us talking today. We thank you for joining us. I'm again Sierra Royster. We'll have Kate Brady today, Amber O'Haver, Jay Harner, and Jody Bainey, and then Erica McFadden at the end. So thank you so much for all of them participating, but for you joining as well. A couple of objectives that we hope that you leave with today. Who are the stakeholders and important partners in your area? So start to understand the rule of the HCBS settings rule. So in case you do not understand that, we're hoping that you leave with a little bit better understanding of that today. And then how does this apply to your work? How does this apply to your center or silk? And what can you do with it after? And then where do you find information on this rule? So there will probably be lots that you still need to learn if this is new for you. So we hope to give you some places that you can go, that you can access some of this information. And then once you have this information, what do you do next to promote these rules or to find the information about it? So we hope that that will be a little bit that you'll come away with today. You'll also have to forgive me. I'm having a little bit of a cough this weekend and only likes it when only makes me cough when I have to talk. So this is fun. But how did April get involved with this? This is a partnership that NASILC and April are working with HSRI on. And this is something that we are hoping that we can encourage the work that centers and silks have been doing on independent living and transition work for a very long time. But to understand that there's a settings rule now that has been in place for a while, but some of that work and how that looks in your state may look very different. But that also can enforce kind of what we've been saying of community choice for so long, and then consumer control as well within that choice. So some of these rules kind of reinforce of what we've been trying to do in independent living for a very long time. So it just seems natural to kind of give those resources and help get you connected with those partners in the community. Some of our role is we're going to bring awareness to the membership and the IL partners on these rules. This is one way that we're doing this is today. We'll have a couple of different things that we'll be doing with this work. But in order to know about it, you have to be aware of it. So a lot of centers probably aren't aware of how this rule affects their work or their consumers they may be working within. So we hope through these situations, excuse me, you'll be able to do that. Okay, so to equip sills and silks, sorry, now it started, with the information to increase Hey, Kate, I'm actually going to ask you to go ahead.
Happy to do that. Thanks, Sierra, and so sorry that you are with us while you have a cough. 'Tis the season. So you could go back a slide if you want, and I'm happy to cover. Yeah. So my name's Kate Brady. I'm a project manager at the Human Services Research Institute, and we host the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems. And it's through that center that the Administration on Disabilities and the Administration on Community Living is funding this home and community-based services partnership that we're so thrilled April and NASILC are a part of. And so April's role, since Sierra wasn't able to get through, April's role is to bring awareness to your membership and to the independent living partners on the HCBS settings rule, which I couldn't agree more, aligns completely with the IL philosophy. So we're hoping that we can equip sills and silks with the information that will allow you to increase your advocacy around transition and diversion from institutional settings. We're hoping that we can provide you with resources so that you'll be better able to educate the people that you're interfacing with in the community, and that we can identify those of you that are already doing this work and position you as leaders within the network. So those are kind of the aims of the partnership. Next slide. Okay, so quick visual description. Happy Halloween all. I am comically in my witch costume. I committed to my children that I would dress up this year, and I use home and community-based services to get ready for my day. And I just have one opportunity each day to get ready. And so it was an all or nothing proposition. And so I'm here with you in my costume, comical as that is. And I guess thank you for the support in the chat there. Other visual descriptions of kind of a middle-aged white woman with short brown curly hair. And my background is a kind of blue-green Human Services Research Institute background. Next slide, please. And just to plug, there is an interpreter who will need access to using her camera online. So just a plug for you, Sierra, so that she can be promoted to a panelist. Her name is Amanda Bellew. All right, so the who and what of home and community-based services, or HCBS. What are home and community-based services? these are the services that are funded to support things like supported employment, finding a job, keeping a job, getting accommodations on that job, transportation. Very often people are using Medicaid waivers for activities of daily living support, such as bathing, dressing, toileting, cooking, perhaps light housekeeping, in-home services like PT, OT, speech therapy, medications, finances, as well as assistive tech and home modifications. So you can see that home and community-based services are really underpinning our access to really critical daily supports for living an independent life in the community. In 2018, more than 4.7 million people received these Medicaid funded services. And each state has its own system for administering Medicaid waivered home and community-based services. And they decide which populations they will offer these waivers to. So though the home and community-based settings rule is a federal rule, there's tremendous variation in the states, which is why your expertise and knowledge and advocacy are going to be so important, because we have to be working on the ground locally in states to advance these changes. Next slide. Thank you. So a little background. Where did this rule come from? Why are we doing this? Well, we knew that people living in community-based settings were still living a life that was closer to an institutional experience, be that in group homes or experiencing day habilitation services that were highly segregated and not effective. So in 2014, the home and community-based final rule was the very first attempt to really define, when we say community-based, what do we mean? What meets that threshold? So since 2014, we have been in what we call a transition period. And in March 17th of 2023, that will be the end of the home and community-based services transition period, meaning that those services that don't align with the requirements have to come into compliance. So the time is now for advocacy. We'll talk a little bit more about particular opportunities for advocacy. So thankfully, ACL and CMS are being very steadfast in ensuring that our service systems adhere to the tenets of the rule and the regulatory criteria. And so these provide the framework for ensuring that services are truly person-centered, and that settings within which those services are provided facilitate autonomy and independence. So already you can see the alignment with the IL philosophy. Next slide, please. Thank you, Sienna. So what does this rule require of services and supports? It requires that they are integrated and support full access to the greater community. It requires that the person receive services in the community with the same degree of access as people not receiving federal Medicaid funding. So that's the bar, right? It's any person living a life not receiving services, that level of access should not be different or diminished by the fact of you receiving services. And it requires that services and supports provide opportunities to seek employment, work in competitive integrative settings, engage in community life, and control your own resources. Next slide, please. So what exactly makes a setting home and community-based? It's in the community. It should provide that full access. As we said, it should provide opportunities to seek employment, in integrated settings at competitive wages, allow participation in community life, and control of resources. It should also always be selected by the person from options that include non-disability specific setting. So it's really important. So in the menu of options, there should always be options of non-disability specific setting. The rule ensures the right to privacy, dignity, respect, and freedom from coercion and restraint, and facilitates individual initiative, autonomy, and independence in making life choices. So that's a very specific requirement, right? So when we evaluate these services and when you're in conversations with people about their life and the supports that they're receiving, you can be listening for violations of people's freedoms or situations in which they've been coerced, or maybe their independence in making choices has not been upheld. And those indicate violations of the HCBS setting. So next slide, please. All right, so the requirements at the state level are that the state has to ensure that all the services meet the minimum standards of integration, access to community life, choice, autonomy, and other protections. It also requires that every person's services are driven by a person-centered plan. They have to receive final statewide transition approval. And so we'll look at which states have already submitted their transition plan and had it approved, and which states have yet to accomplish that, and how you can get involved. Next slide, please. So thankfully, there are some additional requirements when the setting of the services is provider owned or controlled. And those requirements are depicted here. The unit has to be owned or rented for a legally enforceable agreement. It has to allow for privacy, meaning people can lock their bedroom doors. Folks have to have choice of roommates and freedom to furnish and decorate the space as they choose. One should have control over one's own schedule. So that means not only what services one gets, but when they have, right? Access to food at any time. So that means unless there's something in the person-centered plan that says, I really want to change the way I eat. I really want to make sure I don't eat after 11 at night. There should be no limitations on access to food. And any person living in a provider-owned or controlled setting should have choice, should have access to visitors at any time. Next slide, please. All right, I put it in here twice because it's that important. And you would think that these are kind of basic rights that we would assume that any adult living on their own would have, right? And that we shouldn't have to stipulate this. But unfortunately, we know that there are many people all over the country who have disabilities of a variety of kinds, where Medicaid is funding services and they do not have access to food at any time, or they are told they can only have visitors on Saturday afternoon. So it's really important that we bear these things in mind. Control of schedule and activities, of course, physical accessibility, and key to note here that, as I mentioned, any deviation from these has to be supported by a specifically assessed need in the person-centered plan or individualized service plan, with a plan to reevaluate and return those freedoms, right? So it's not indefinitely that I can't eat my cheese puffs after 11 p.m., right? It's once I have accomplished a change in my habits, or once I've accomplished the change in my weight, and what supports am I going to receive to regain access to food at any time, so that I have the autonomy to make choices. Next slide, please. All right, so this person-centered plan that drives all services has some requirements, thankfully, in the HCBS settings law. And those are that it should always identify strengths, preferences, needs, both clinical and support needs, and any desired outcomes that the individual has. It should include very individually identified goals and preferences. And these goals and preferences should speak to relationships, community participation, employment, income, savings, healthcare, wellness, education, anything else that is both important to and important for the person. And it should reflect what is important to the individual and speak to the manner that they want services delivered so that health and welfare are ensured. It may identify any risk factors so that supports can engage to minimize those. And the plan should be understood by the individual. That means it should be free of jargon, and they should have had a primary voice in the development of that plan. And of course, it should reflect any cultural considerations. Next slide, please. All right, so why are we talking to you about this? Why are we so concerned about public engagement? Well, the Administration of Community Living works closely with CMS to implement the settings rule. The rule is very key to engaging community members in the development, provision, and oversight of HCBS programs. And we're so grateful that for the very first time, ACL is specifically funding public engagement efforts. So next slide, please. So what do we mean by public engagement? Well, there are a number of opportunities to engage and a number of methods that you can take, and we'll go over some of those. In the short term, and I'll put this link in the chat after I'm done going through the slides. Every state has a statewide transition plan, meaning what are their plans for ensuring that all the places that deliver services are in compliance with the rule. And they have to release that rule for public comment, consider those comments, revise it, and finalize it. And so there are opportunities during that process for people with disabilities, their families, organizations to look at that plan, see what they think, and provide comments. There's also a heightened scrutiny package. Heightened scrutiny very simply means sites that the state, often the state agency, has identified as not likely in compliance now. And states have to make plans for how they expect additional federal oversight to review those sites and how they will in the future come into compliance. So they produce what's called the heightened scrutiny package. And CMS, the Centers for Medicaid, will identify some states around the country each year to do site visits. So they go and look at those sites so that they can provide monitoring and feedback about the experiences of the people in those services. And ACL holds stakeholder calls. So there are always those two opportunities to engage if your state is one where a heightened scrutiny visit will be occurring. There are also corrective action plans. So CMS put forward the opportunity for states to show that their policies and procedures reflect the settings criteria and that they're making efforts to implement the criteria to the fullest extent possible, but then they're going to make a corrective action plan to allow for more time and more actions to bring a system into full compliance. And then I put in bold here, waiver amendments and renewals, because when we are all said and done with the transition period, all states still deliver home and community-based services through waivers, Medicaid waivers. And you are probably serving tons of folks who come into SILS and talk to SILS about their service experience or their experience on the waiting list. And it is the waiver documents and any times in which the state proposes amendments that there are always opportunities for advocates to engage. So that's a really important one to keep an eye on. Next slide, please. All right, so here's just the restate. I think we've covered those opportunities for engagement. Next slide, please. I don't want to go over time. So when we say stakeholders, who do we mean? We really mean everyone. We mean individual people with disabilities and their families, advocacy groups, every kind of advocacy group, self-advocacy groups, parent groups, sibling groups. We also mean the P&A, right? The Protection and Advocacy Organization in your state, the Ombudsman's Office, Adult Protective Services, and today, most importantly, Centers for Independent Living and statewide independent living councils. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there are a myriad of ways that you can get involved. When a state hosts a period of public comment, you can show up in person and you can give public comment. That can be just the comments on your experience or something in particular that you're concerned about regarding the state system. You can submit those same comments in writing. You can also coordinate templates for others to use in submitting their comments to support people in knowing what to say. You can consult the partners in your state. ACL is currently funding the national network. So not only is April and NASILF involved in this work, but the National Association of DV Councils, the National Disability Rights Network, and AUCD, the Association for University Centers on Disability, as well as ASAN, are all involved. So in any given state, you probably have partners that you can be working with to submit comments. Always you have the opportunity to call your elected officials. And I think for your day-to-day work, the opportunity that we really want to support you in is to help someone who's receiving services be aware of their rights and be able to decipher when those rights have been violated and how that applies to the home and community-based settings role. Next slide, please. All right, so quick review. Settings have to be integrated. They have to ensure the right to privacy, dignity, respect, autonomy, and freedom from coercion and restraint. And provider settings have additional requirements. And all services should facilitate choice. Next slide. So when we're thinking about the state system, I want you to be aware of these deadlines. March 17th, 2023, that's the deadline for state compliance. So you can look at this link here, and that's how you'll know whether your state has already attained final approval. CAPs, or corrective action plans, are due January 1st, 2023. States are not required to release their corrective action plans for public comment, but that does not mean that you can't call and say, we'd like to understand if you're thinking about submitting a corrective action plan. We'd like to have a chance to talk through that with you. Can always make those requests. And then we anticipate continued CMS heightened scrutiny reviews for any settings that are considered presumptively eligible. And we have seen, it's really important for you all to know, we have seen already when advocates identify sites that are of concern to them and communicate that, those sites go on the heightened scrutiny list. So it really does matter and it really is impactful. And all of this stuff is super complex, and the most successful states are working in coalition with other organizations. Next slide, please. All right, I think we've covered this. I'm going to keep going for the interest of time. Thank you. All right, so yeah, we can skip this one too. I know we're a little over time. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. All right, so by January 1st, states have to have told CMS what is their oversight system: licensure, certification, provider manuals, person-centered plan monitoring. They also have to tell them what is the assessment process that they will be using for initial compliance and ongoing compliance of settings. And they have to describe what is the beneficiary's recourse. What is your option if you notice a provider is not in compliance? So they're going to call this a grievance process, might be notification of the case manager, and it will be different in every state. So it's very critical that you know what the grievance process and what the beneficiary recourse is in your state. And the state has to say how they are going to respond, right? So it's not a one-way loop. It should be a closed loop. Next slide, please. All right, here's a map that I won't go over because you can access it on the links that we'll put in the chat, but it just shows you states that have pending statewide transition plans, initial approval or final approval. Next slide, please. All right, as a reminder, corrective action plans can include, and this is important, they can include modifications to the state's compliance with, ensuring that all services provide access to the broader community, opportunities for employment, private unit and or choice of roommate, and choice of non-disability specific settings. In other words, a corrective action plan may delineate how a certain part of the home and community-based service system in a state is not yet compliant with those requirements. They have to be concrete and time limited, and they have to address how the state will in the future ensure that access, opportunities for employment, choice of a private unit or roommates, and choice of non-disability settings will in the future be made available. Next slide. So they have to be able to show that they have a plan and that they've done everything they can to adhere to these requirements, even though they're falling short, and that their plan delineates how they'll get there. They are encouraged to seek public input. So I am encouraging you to initiate that conversation with your state agency. Next slide, please. And then there we are. We'll go to the statewide independent living council. I'm thrilled to pass it over to Amber, chair of NASILC and executive director of INSILC.
This is Amber speaking. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. It was a lot of really, really great information. I even learned several things that were new to me too, so I appreciate that. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amber O'Haver, and I am the vice chair of NASILC and the current executive director of the Indiana Statewide Independent Living Council. And I'm going to go through and address these spooky or sort of sometimes intimidating, scary related components of the rule and how the SILC plays a role or can play a role in advocating to ensure compliance and our peers' rights when it comes to the HCBS settings rule. So first, let me give you a visual description of myself. So I'm a middle-aged white woman. I have very long blonde hair pulled back with a black headband today. I am wearing a black and white sort of borrowed V-neck sweater. I have silver little ball earrings and a silver necklace on, and my background is blurred behind me, but I'm at home in my office today. And again, happy to be here with everyone. So if you go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So before I dig into and start going through this, I just want to say that I'm really thrilled to be working with various national partners, and I so appreciate ACL really providing NASILC and April and NDRN and all the other national groups the opportunity to receive some funding to do work in this space, and particularly NASILC, because the HCBS settings rule really presents a great opportunity for silks to really dig into their duties and then exercise their authorities, which again, I think is exceptional. And it's something that, quite frankly, the independent living network across this country and in our states has not had the opportunity to do a lot of work around when it comes to specifically identifying advocacy opportunities when it comes to the HCBS settings rule. So here we are. So I want to start with just identifying and talking a little bit about building and bridging partnerships or collaborations in your state as a silk. And the role of the silk when it comes to those. So when I'm talking about building and bridging partnerships and collaborations, the importance of those is essentially how can you come together with those various agencies, entities, consumer-directed groups in your state and work together or leverage your different strengths and knowledge, right, to advocate to ensure the rights of our peers with disabilities when it comes to the HCBS settings rule. And so when I'm talking about state agencies, I'm essentially talking about the individuals, or sorry, the entities that have oversight sort of in control or are overseeing the development and implementation and compliance when it comes to the state transition plans. And then when I'm talking about state advocacy entities, I'm really talking about all of those various advocacy entities in your state, like the protection and advocacy systems, the DD councils, your USEDs, your even ACLU state chapter, AARP state chapters, your ombudsman offices when it comes to long-term care, the list goes on and on and on. Essentially anyone that has their fingers or mitts or sort of advocacy efforts and engagement when it comes to home and community-based services or just community living in general. So another role or another piece of the work that silks can get engaged in and that really can play, I think, a very strong role when it comes to the HCBS settings role is around information dissemination and educational awareness. And so what I mean by this is the silk could arrange and schedule and set up some trainings to educate the SILs and their consumers or board members, right, about the HCBS settings rule to better understand what that looks like and what it is and what its purpose is and how it's really directly tied to the independent living philosophy, which is great. And then also disseminating information and doing some educational and awareness efforts and activities when it comes to consumers and our peers with disabilities. So, and one of the ways I think that really gets back to why it's important to have strong partnerships and collaborations in your state with various partners is because when it comes to information dissemination and educational and awareness, it's really important to tap those partners to help you disseminate the information. So for example, your P&As are really the ones that have access in terms of monitoring visits, right, to a lot of these spaces and places and facilities where our peers are and can very easily share and provide information about the rule and what their rights are in language in ways that is easy to wrap their heads around and understand. And that's something you can also work with your partners on to develop. One of the really great resources, I would say, again, and express to everyone on here is ASAN, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, is phenomenal. They have phenomenal resources in plain language and lots of other templates and lots of other, they have a toolkit that's really great, that's really helpful, I think, that can also be tapped and can be tweaked to your needs or use in your state to then share and disseminate and push out through those various partners you have. Your AAAs are another great one to also tap to help you disseminate information about the settings rule. So I would also advise developing partnerships and collaborations with them, right, to sort of start link up together and start working together to ensure the rights of people with disabilities in your state when it comes to the HCBS settings rule. Okay, next slide, please. So this really gets more into the systems advocacy piece, which is really an example of how a silk can dig into its authorities. So systems advocacy, when I'm talking about that, when it comes to the settings rule, I'm talking about like what is already happening in your state when it comes to systemic advocacy opportunities that you can engage in. So instead of recreating the wheel or starting something over again or something that's already occurring, can you get in work groups that are already taking place? Can you get involved in tag teaming on training opportunities to educate our peers with disabilities on what their rights are when it comes to the rule? What is already taking place? What's happening in your state, really to dig into? And if there isn't a lot happening in your state or anything, or there aren't opportunities necessarily that you think are a good fit for the silk at that time, you could also then, as a silk, really start to develop or implement or create, right, and lead and direct your own advocacy opportunities, and then pull those additional partners that I talked about a minute ago into the fold and the work that you're doing as a silk. So the silk can engage, again, the work that's already occurring and become a part of that work. It also can lead and direct some various types of advocacy opportunities, right, to help ensure compliance with the rule, and then also, again, to ensure the rights of our peers with disabilities. So the next thing is around consumer engagement. And this piece I think is really important. So when we talk about the silk, there isn't always necessarily a lot of thought around consumer engagement because, to be quite honest, our centers for independent living are the ones that do a really great job, right, providing those direct services and those day-to-day services, and are engaged with consumers on the ground every day, doing work around diversion, transition, and home and community-based services related advocacy supports. So I would say, though, for the silk, one of the ways you can help address this advocacy needs when it comes to the rule is really looking at how can a silk statewide, right, help to recruit and bring in people with disabilities into the fold of doing this work and learning about it, gaining knowledge about it, right, which then helps to empower them, which is the next one I have on my slide in our consumer engagement. So for example, in Indiana, one of the ways that we have done that work as a silk is really utilizing our existing leadership programs. So a lot of silks across this country are doing like youth leadership forums or youth leadership programs, or ours is called Advocates in Action. And then we just did another one this past summer, a all virtual event or programming that was called Shifting the Narrative, and built in a lot of this type of education and training and awareness when it came to the rule and other HCBS type of issues that are being experienced here in Indiana, but not only talked about them and educated them on the issues, worked together as a peer-to-peer network and group to really get into the space of brainstorming around action. Like, what do activities look like? What do next steps look like in terms of us as consumers? Do we work together? Do we work with the silk? Do we work with other partners and bring them in? So it's really just about thinking more broadly in terms of consumer engagement when it comes to recruitment, empowerment, and sort of utilizing what you're already doing as a silk if you're doing any of those types of programming. The other thing I would say when it comes to consumer engagement, and I think, quite honestly, we as silks don't do enough of this, but I think it's because we're so engaged and engulfed in doing the work sometimes that we forget, it's a privilege to be in spaces where there is some pretty heavy gatekeeping that often happens for us as people with disabilities. And so we have this unsaid responsibility, quite frankly, to leverage that privilege in that space and say, who is not here at the table that is my peer that needs to be here? Who else can I help get here in this space to learn about the advocacy or the information that's being shared when it comes to the HCBS settings rule? Or are there advocacy opportunities taking place that our peers with disabilities can be engaged in? And then how can we as a silk make sure we get them pulled into the fold and working together and collaborating with the existing group, right, to conduct those advocacy opportunities. Next slide, please. So this is sort of where when we were forming and putting this presentation together, we talked a lot about, what can a silk currently do? Where should the silk currently focus its energy and time? And then following this, I'll flip to our final slide, which will talk about like some future opportunities and ways the silk, right, can focus its energy and time when it comes to advocacy efforts around the HCBS settings rule. So I would first say, one of the things that's really important for folks to do is find out if your state has a final approved state transition plan. And if it doesn't, find out why. So I think if you're wanting to know how to navigate that or where to find that, Kate touched on this a little bit, but you can even ask your DSE. Your DSE is going to know exactly where to point you to get access to the state transition plan. Or if you have a relationship with other state leadership or agency folks, you can also tap them and ask them about that, and then request a copy of the state plan. So in Indiana, for example, this is one of the things that we are going to be working with our state on to ensure greater access to the plan. Indiana's plan was approved in June. They didn't push out that information though until September. And when they pushed out that information, they pushed out an announcement that said, if you would like a copy of the plan, you need to email us at this email address to request it. Okay, so I did that, but wouldn't it be much easier and much less restrictive if we could just click on a link, right? And up would pop the plan and we would have access to it right there instead of having to ask for permission to get access to a copy of the plan. So those kind of little things, I think, are ways that we can talk with our state agency folks to ensure greater access to the information we need to be better advocates to do this work. So the other thing I would encourage you to do is review the plan. I will say, Indiana's plan is 167 pages long. These plans are not easy to read. They're not necessarily easy to follow, and they're extremely long. So one of the ways I think that you could also leverage or tap some of those partnerships that you have with other entities in your state is to contact your P&A or your DD council or your USET or whoever else, right, you're working with or that you know and have a relationship with in your state when it comes to disability related advocacy or services, and say, hey, do you know much about this plan? And if you do you have any way you can help me break this down and understand this? Or I have these questions, can you help walk me through this? I know in Indiana, that's something I do a lot with our P&A because they tend to have a much deeper level of knowledge and experience when it comes to these plans because they've been involved in, from most of them from the beginning in their states, around providing written comment, being involved in development work groups when it comes to the transition plan and all of that. So they have a little bit of a deeper insight a lot of times and are better equipped to sometimes answering questions you may have about the plan. So they're a great resource. Your partners, utilize them, leverage them. Don't be afraid to reach out even to your state agency folks. We have an excellent relationship with our Indiana Medicaid director here, and I tap her for information and questions all the time, which she appreciates because some things are not on her radar and some things she's not aware of. And when I reach out and ask questions or pose inquiries to her, it helps raise her awareness of things that they need to get better at doing, right, in the state agency where these kind of issues are occurring or these plans exist, right, and need to be implemented appropriately. So also dig into, Kate touched on this, but you know, how essentially is your state planning to provide a grievance process? What is that? What does that look like? Is it clear? Is it transparent? Is it something you think that you and your peers or our peers would be able to easily navigate? And think about that from a lot of different types of disabilities when you're considering that. Some other questions are around, how does your state plan or transition plan address any needed consumer transitions? So if there's a site that says, you know what, we're just not going to get in compliance, we're not going to meet in compliance, we're going to have to transition some folks out of here, we can't continue to serve them. Oh crap, what happens then? How is that being addressed in the plan? Do you think it's appropriate or not? You know, dig into that and look for that kind of information. The other key piece that I think often gets missed is, how is your state transition plan addressing issues of equity? How are they addressing specific needs or prioritizing folks who are multiply marginalized and are people of color, who are with disabilities, who are individuals who are part of other marginalized groups and communities? So I know it may seem kind of odd just to think well, we're talking about home community-based services. What does that have to do for necessarily ensuring equity? And I will tell you, a lot. So, and I would not be surprised if there isn't much when it comes to addressing these kinds of issues of equity in these plans. So it's an opportunity for you to dig into that with your state if that is something that you think is important, which I think it is. So next slide, please. This one, I won't go into a lot of detail on, but one of the other ways I think you can sort of like dig into and find out how well your state's doing in terms of like weaving and webbing a lot of the advocacy efforts or implementation and compliance of the statewide transition plan when it comes to the settings rule is looking at, other plans in your state. Do we as a state have anything in our state plan for independent living when it comes to the HCBS settings rule? If we don't, why not? Let's find out. Let's dig into that. Same thing with the DD Council. It's 5-year strategic plan. The WIO estate plan through Voc Rehab. Our state P&As are required to do their priorities and objectives on a regular basis and submit those for approval from the feds. How is the HCBS settings rule being addressed through those priorities and objectives at your P&A? In Indiana, we are developing a brand new state plan on aging, and you bet your butt, I'm going to make sure as a silk, there are issues addressed in there when it comes to the HCBS settings rule. And then are there other plans that are applicable in your state, right? That maybe aren't federal related plans you need to have, but that are really important and key to addressing this from a more comprehensive level when it comes to compliance with the rule. Next slide, please. So this will be my last slide, and then I'll turn it over, I think, to Kathy to facilitate our panel. But what does the future for silk involvement or silk focus look like? What can that look like? So I know right now our silks are looking at amending our current plan to do a 1-year extension. Is it a possibility that you might want to build into that some education and awareness training and activities or efforts as a silk to address this HCBS settings rule? So think about that. Another thing to do is if you do decide to do that, you could then get everyone prepped in your network and be educated and up to speed on the rule, and then be able to build out and dig into the rule a little bit more in the development of the spill and use it as a really great, so the spill is a really great tool or mechanism, right, to address advocacy related efforts and issues when it comes to the rule from an IL network perspective. So it's not just the silk, it's not just the spill, it's not just the DSE, it's really all encompassing. A lot of silks have seats on their state commissions on rehabilitation. How can you leverage that? How can you ensure that you as a silk in that seat, whoever that might be, silk staff, silk member, how are you asking questions about the rule and how that commission's addressing compliance with that? So the other thing, again, I've mentioned is partnering with the different various groups in your state to conduct education and training events for peers with disabilities on their rights in accordance with the rule. I think it'd be wonderful to figure out how to tag team with your P&A to get into some of these sites and facilities that sometimes we may have some difficulty getting into, quite honestly. Without them, we shouldn't, but we do. And doing some of these trainings for folks in these settings. And then also, talking to them when we're doing these trainings, really talking about, what is the rule? What's its purpose? Why is it needed? How does it apply to me as a consumer and my peers with disabilities? And then provide some examples of what violations of that rule would look like, for folks. And then talk to them about, what do I do if my rights are violated? Who do I contact? Who do I notify? How does this work? How does this happen? And again, hopefully you've been working and engaging with your state on allowing and providing for a very clear and transparent grievance complaint process. So, and then again, the last thing, what does engagement of consumers or people with disabilities look like when it comes to ensuring compliance with the rule? Site visits is a really great one in tandem with CMS, because oftentimes they pull advocates in to help with those. So I think that's also a really good one. Another one is pushing out advocacy alerts. We do that a lot here. Our peers really latch onto those, and we provide action opportunities within those advocacy alerts, not just the opportunity, but templates and actions that folks can take to help make it a little easier for our peers to engage. And then continuing to leverage like your leadership programming and trainings that you do as a SILC. And then we host a lot of times these disability community conversations that are just spaces for people with disabilities, no one else. And we talk about issues around home community-based services, transition, diversion. And then typically we end those and wrap those up with some calls to action and what that looks like. And that is a group developed and decided decision. So just really reinforces consumer direction and that peer-to-peer support model that independent living is so beautiful in providing to our disability community. And with that, I will end and wrap things up. And Kathy, I think you're up.
Hello, everybody. This is Kathy Cooper. I am going to step in and help Sierra out. A verbal description of myself is I am a white woman in my early 50s. I have brown blonde hair. It's pulled up on a messy bun on my head with a pink and mauve shirt. The background is a white wall with a red, white, and blue picture. I am the chair of the National Association of Statewide Independent Living Councils, and I'm also the executive director of the SILC in Kansas. I'm going to have a few questions for our panelists, and we're going to have Jay Harner and Jody Bainey from the Roads to Freedom Independent Living Center join us, along with Amber O'Haver, who you just heard from. And we're going to ask them some questions about the work they're doing in this area and how it has strengthened the advocacy in this work. And Kate is going to help me with this too. So we'll get started. I'll go ahead and turn off my screen so you guys can see the panelists and the interpreters a little better. What are some activities that your SIL and SILC is doing now around HCBS? And what has worked for you to get stakeholders engaged? And just feel free to jump in, Jody, Jay, or Amber.
Well, this is Amber. I can jump in. One of the things I know that we do, so we are involved pretty heavily right now in working with our state and a couple of other entities to expand self-direction in the state of Indiana. So we do a lot of work around that. That is obviously an HCBS piece to doing, ensuring community living and access to community supports. And so we do a lot of work right now around that. In Indiana, our self-direction programming is like bottom of the pack in terms of the entire country. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. The other thing we do is our SILC hosts and conducts a monthly long-term care advocate coalition meeting. And that coalition meeting essentially is just consists of majority, like 85% of them are people with disabilities. And they essentially determine and figure out how to get involved when it comes to issues around community integration and HCBS. So it doesn't hurt either to compensate our peers when you have the ability to do that for their time and expertise, because their lived experience, our lived experience, is just as valuable as the professional experience that folks have that we work with on a day-to-day basis.
Hi, this is Jay Harner from Roads to Freedom. I would say one thing that we really do, we work on advocating on our consumers' behalf. We get lots of calls on a regular basis for individuals that are looking for services and they're unaware or unsure of what services are out there for them, how they qualify, what the financial restrictions are. We've been advocating throughout the state to expand services. We've been working with recently with our state's budget to expand pay, increase pay, add benefits over time. I think many of us have experienced since COVID. There's been a drastic reduction, at least here in the state of Pennsylvania, with direct care workers. We find individuals unable to find direct care workers because of the rate of pay has not gone up substantially in comparison to many of the different sectors of employment that's possible within our area. And we We are in Williamsport, which is like Cumberland County, which is in the center part of the state, which is a little more rural. So we have issues with transportation for not only for consumers but for direct care workers. So getting people to get to their homes and supply the services that they're needed to remain independent in the community and safe has been a challenge right now. We're working with the state to expand that. We did receive an 8% budget increase several months ago, but with inflation and the price of gas, it hasn't really touched a lot of things for some. So I take a lot of calls just to, again, provide the information of how the process can be started, what they need to do. Myself, I'm a quadriplegic. I'm paralyzed from the chest down. I broke my neck when I was 18 years old. I've been using home and community-based services since January '98. So I've not only do I live it, but as my job, as my profession right now, I promote it. And as our still, we can just advocate to remove those barriers for anyone who wants to live independently on their own and stay out of nursing homes, which are prisons. Because once people are subjected to go into those facilities, especially since COVID, it's difficult to get them out. And anything we can do to keep them, thriving in their own personal, comfortable environment is what we do on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you guys. We're going to go on to the next question. How do you see advocating for this rule as being important to IL? And how do you think we can spread the message of its importance?
This is Jay again. I mean, independent living without these services, myself, I would be in a nursing home. Many other individuals need, as we learned about earlier, these services provide, I need assistance with showering, bathing, and getting dressed, and food preparation, transportation, all of the things that, daily activities that allow me to remain independent. So for us to promote those services for individuals that are out there that don't know this, we get calls every day. Again, there are people like, hey, I heard about this transition program, or what is independent living? What can I do? Or somebody that's, an adult child that's been living with their parents and they're 35 years old and the family doesn't know what to do as they get older, and they've never heard of independent living because all they've been told their entire lives is, they'll never be able to live on their own or do anything, and they become almost, recluses in their own home because they don't know what's available out there. So the more that we can promote and provide the information that's available, the better off that the living community would be as a whole.
Jody, this is Amber. I didn't know if you had anything to add. I don't want to take from you if you want to jump in.
I was just going to support Jay and what he said, continuing to advocate for the supports and services that are already out there. We always say that specifically centers for independent living sometimes are the best kept secret. Oftentimes people don't know what we do or, what services and supports that we can connect individuals to. So education is always at the front of our game plan. How are we going to continue to push it out? I can say that, at our center, one of the things that we use the most is social media. There are so many different forms of social media out there, and opportunity to educate others by doing so.
I'll follow up on what Jody said there. We get, she said we are a secret, and we tend to be, especially in our area. I mean, we'll get our name is the Center for Independent Living. People will call all the time and ask if we have any rooms available, because they hear the name, and then that's what their first thing is. Do you have rooms available? Can I come live there? How do we go about that? So by just promoting and being interactive in the community, we do a lot of outreach. We try to attend as many events as we can. We have an open door policy here. We're bringing in more groups all the time to actually show them what we do. We're not just, we provide employment services, advocacy, assistive technology, representative payee, independent living skills, peer mentoring, the reuse program. I mean, I can go on, and people will call and they'll say, I have no idea, and they may call and they may be asking just for information I had somebody call the other day looking for a walker because or a rollator, their wheel fell off. And we are talking about the waiver services, how they can get, because she was literally paying somebody $10 or 10 hours a month that's living in her apartment area to take care, to help her go shopping, personal needs. I mean, she's not to be too upfront, but she was getting one shower a week, and she's crying to me on the phone that she wants to do more, but she can't take care of herself because of lack of care. She doesn't want to go to a nursing home. So that one call about a rollator turned into independent living waiver program, assistive technology. She doesn't have a cell phone or a tablet. She's by herself. So we talk about, here we have a program called Tech Owl through Temple University, and we can assist with providing her a free cell phone, giving her demos how to use it. She's eligible, excuse me, for SNAP benefits, which is food stamps here in Pennsylvania. So she's eligible for that. So she's eligible for free phone service. So a 2-minute phone call that she thought she wasn't going to get no information from turned into 45 minutes of her kind of being overwhelmed with what we can provide and how we can help her.
This is Jody again. I just wanted to add that a lot of our work is not only based in our county, but statewide and federally as well. We're always looking at all aspects, and how can we bring people with disabilities to the table so their voices are heard.
I think just to kind of sum up this question, this rule is independent living. It is at the very heart, the very core, right, of what we do and our philosophy. And the SILs are just a phenomenal resource to tap and refer folks to when their rights are being violated. They don't know what their rights are when it comes to the settings rule, and making sure that we leverage our partners and collaborators, right, to share that information with folks in these types of settings where the rule, right, is applicable, and ensuring that they have information to access the SIL in their area so they can get access to all those phenomenal services, right, that Jay and Jody have just talked about and shared today, and then can also ensure that if someone's rights are being violated after they've educated them on what those rights are based on the rule, they can help them address that and walk through and navigate that process, because it can be extremely intimidating. And a lot of folks are very scared, right, to address and hold folks accountable in these various facilities or settings if they're violating the rule. So kind of tie it back to the rule there.
And I'll follow up on one other thing. Recently in the past, especially since COVID, we've come across guardianships, and we've run into many individuals who get locked into a guardianship, no fault of their own or no wanting of their own, or sometimes not even to their own knowledge. And these guardianships can overtake an individual's life with no rhyme or reason, just because they went into the hospital for a simple sickness or injury, and next thing you know, they have some complications, and before they know it, we're coming across these individuals are becoming, the state of the AAA is becoming a guardian. So we've become starting to work vigorously with the state, different lawmakers, different congressmen, representatives, to educate individuals on how guardianships are being used to almost imprison these individuals. And I don't want to go too far, but when they get locked into a guardianship, they have no say in their life. They have nothing. They have no control of their finances, their care, where they want to live, how they want to live, how they'll be treated. They're told, they're a prisoner. They're told when to sleep, what they're going to eat, when they're going to eat, how they're going to eat, and so on. So we come across that. We're working with the state, as I said, to educate, and hopefully we can try to peel back these petals of the onion so people can realize how much this stinks.
All right. Well,
Amber,
guys, I hate to cut it short. I'm so sorry, Amber. We are running quite a bit behind, and I do have to go ahead and cut this a little bit short. We do have Commissioner Jill Jacobs from the Office of Independent Living Programs with us, and I know that she has some things that she would like to say, so we're going to go ahead and cut away to Jill. Go ahead, Jill.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill. I am the Commissioner of the Administration on Disabilities. I'm very happy to be here. So I want to talk a little bit about the settings rule and why it's so important. When we talk about the settings rule, I know that this is something that the Centers for Independent Living, I was an executive director at a SIL, so I wasn't really familiar in my role there about exactly what this meant. What does this mean to us as Centers for Independent Living? How does this affect people with disabilities? And so I want to be clear what this settings rule really means. The settings rule lays out some very basic rights for people with disabilities. Things you wouldn't think need to even be laid out. Things like and this is a lot for people who often live in settings like group homes often. People who are living in environments that maybe are more groups of people living together than their own place in HCBS, maybe people who receive day services, people who live in what is considered an assisted living or independent living center, but it's really just right there next to a nursing home or one other hallway in a nursing home. But those services are being covered under home and community-based services. So these are the sorts of things that we are looking at, states and providers, and how are these services being provided? We're looking at basic civil rights that many of us here can't even fathom because we're part of the independent living movement. We are IL, and we don't even think about the reality that there are people out there that live in HCBS settings and they have never experienced these most basic rights. Okay, so these are things like, I can have a lock on my door. If I'm hungry, I should have access to food whenever I want it. My food shouldn't be locked up. Nobody should be taking my SNAP card from me and buying food for the whole community and sliding my card. These are, they're really, I should have an opportunity to choose when I shower and bathe, who I hang out with, if I want a beer on a Friday night, if I have intimate relationships. Can someone come over and visit me at where I live, or are there rules around visiting hours? Those are really basic things that a lot of us in the independent living community have not ever experienced. We're so used to directing our own care, to having a voice. And yes, I know we often feel in the IL movement, nobody listens to us. We don't have our own voice, and that's true. But y'all, I'm talking about a whole nother level, as they say, okay? And so that's what we're really working on here. That's what we're really focused on here. When we are looking at this, we are looking at this key tenet of nothing about us without us. That's a big part of who we are, right? In the IL movement. So when it comes to the HCBS settings rule, we are really wanting to make sure it's been a big push for us. And it's not something we're just saying. Since I've been here, I've said, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to put funds towards moving this advocacy ball down the road to making sure people know that this exists. In this particular situation, the HCBS settings rule, it's a requirement that people with disabilities are at the table, they're being heard, their voices are getting heard at the state level, that there's public comment opportunities, okay? But we at ACL know, even when it's not a requirement according to some rule, it should always be the reality. So for us, the HCBS settings rule, I view it as the first step in a big process around advocacy. We want to make sure that we are participated in the process and making sure that we are informing and engaging, and we're giving people the tools that are needed to really and truly be part of the process. So we want to see a cadre of knowledge-filled advocates engage fully in making that change happen. And I see the HCBS settings rule as a first step in it. I want to see us be successful. I want to see us engaged in a way that we can see CMS listening to us, that we can see change happening at the state level and at the provider level because we are being heard. And with that success, I want us to continue to build on that. I want us to continue to coalition build. I want to see our numbers and our interactions grow and grow. And I want to make sure we're including all sorts of people with disabilities and people who are aging in that process. In the IL world, we sometimes leave out people who are aging. We sometimes leave out people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people who maybe don't actually get their voices heard, people who have had guardians since the minute they turned 18, okay? People who have never had a chance to speak their voice. And that's why I want the Centers for Independent Living involved in this. I need you all to reach out to the people we have left behind in the past. And the settings rule is a huge part of that. So I want to also let you know that the work that we've done so far on this, when we came on board and started it, there was this feeling of, can we even be hopeful that anyone's going to listen to us? What's the point? But I want to tell you what the point is. We have seen things happen. When we very first started working on this, our meetings with CMS, they weren't all, the way they viewed things may have not been the way we in the IL movement would want them to view us. Maybe, we weren't really being heard. We were at the table or in the room, but we were kind of like a checked box. That ain't the case anymore, my friends. We now are really engaged in the whole process with CMS. What is going out to states, and you'll be able to see at the state level some of these letters that are coming from CMS, and some of these action plans that CMS is, CAPS as they're called, corrective action plans that CMS is issuing to states. You're going to see the advocate's voice in those. You will read them and you'll know, wait a second, somebody was at the table who really got us heard. And that somebody is y'all. It's advocates. Okay, that's who's at the table and who's really getting these things heard. And we need you, SILs, to be reaching out to these communities that have never been heard before. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are in group homes, who are in day programs, whose parents always speak for them. That's where we need you, okay? I will tell you that we also, ACL, me personally, Jill, I am going to every state that is getting a review by CMS. I'm going with the CMS team, and I'm looking at every single provider that is put forward that needs a review. And when we see that providers have issues across the board, we are identifying that there are systemic issues in that state. We are being heard. We are going out there. We are making a change. I need you all to participate in this. And when I see this change making happening, I see you all putting in your time. I see this happening in a whole new way, real, old school coalition building, take it back to the 60s and 70s. I see that happening. We see these changes happening. I'm going to tell you, we have meetings now with CMS where advocates from the state get together and they identify all these issues. They meet with CMS with us. This real grassroots work. They come forward lots of times, the advocates do, and they say, we saw the list of providers that need to be looked at. We need these, here's a couple more providers that need to be looked at. Here's our backup, here's our reason. Here's some systemic issues we see in the state where we feel the settings rule is being violated. I'm telling you, we go out to those places, then we add them to our list. I put my eyes on those places. I come back, we write solid reports, and the state hears that information. It didn't even used to be that the states were going to have any kind of public documents around it. Yes, we were going to send letters to the states about it. Yes, we were going to say, here's the concerns we have. Now, those are going to be public. Y'all can look and see what you've done, how your differences, what your work has made a difference, how the states are going to have to respond to that. So I appreciate your time, your interest. I'm really glad you're here. I want to see us go places. I want us to go there together, and we can go far beyond this, far beyond this. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Jacobs. This is Abby Ritter from April. We've had a few question and answers come through. This question was for Amber. The question is, are your services available in ASL, either through an interpreter or an advocate who's deaf or hard of hearing?
Hi, this is Amber. So we don't provide, so just to be clear, we don't provide direct services. We're not a Center for Independent Living, but when we engage in activities with our peers with disabilities, when it comes to systems change work or doing like disability listening sessions or community conversations, we always, as a best practice, have ASL interpreters and live captioning. Always, always, always. And we also provide whatever other accommodations, right, are needed or necessary. So, and also just to be clear, the past 2.5, maybe almost 3 years, I think now we've been doing everything virtually. There's not a lot that we've gone back to in terms of on-site or in-person, but if and when we do, and when we did before, if there were any related accommodations for whatever event or activity we were hosting or conducting, we also provided any on-site or in-person related accommodations, which includes those ASL interpreters and even live captioning at those events. So yes, we do as a best practice when we do any of our work. We actually have a policy around it that those are always provided. And just to add, we also doubled up our budget for accommodations and supports because we wanted to engage consumers more. And we knew that in order to do that successfully, our peers were going to need accommodations to participate and engage. So it's a really key piece, I think, to doing this work when it comes to advocacy around the HCBS settings rule.
Thank you so much, Amber. Jody, I see that you are typing an answer to this question, but I didn't know if you wanted the opportunity to answer it out loud. Either way is fine. The question is, how do you maintain or enhance communication equity for those with diverse needs to help them advocate for themselves?
Sorry, my computer was freezing and not allowing me to answer the question. But as a Center for Independent Living, we have multiple assistive technology programs that allow us access to communication devices and whatever a participant needs to be able to ensure that their voice is heard.
Excellent. Thank you so much. As a reminder, folks are welcome to put questions into the Q&A. We still do have a few minutes, and we would love to hear what folks want to know more about. In the meantime, the recording and the PowerPoints for this webinar will be added to the April website under the Advocacy tab. So you can visit www.april-rural.org and select Advocacy, and you'll see the information there. We have a raised hand from Todd. 1 second, Todd. There you go. You now have the ability to unmute.
Thank you so much. Jill, hi, it's Todd Holloway. I'm curious, have we considered any of these new HCBS rules when it comes to something you and I are very familiar with, and that is people getting relocated due to disasters and ending up having troubles with Medicaid and other issues where they end up out of state?
Todd, can you repeat that question? I didn't get all of it. Were you asking about what happens in disasters when people end up out of state?
Yes, in relation to HCBS, the new rules, do you see any caveats that would strengthen our position about, Medicaid being able to even transfer across state lines, where we've worked with the Disaster Recovery Medicaid Act and looking at these new rules and how that would play out for somebody who has had to be relocated into another state?
So these settings rules they don't have any specific elements that would impact disaster at all. I mean, what impacts disaster and HCBS and how people can move across states has a lot to do with reciprocity between states, about how, HCBS is funded between state and federal funds, and it kind of prevents movement in that way. There are some potential solutions around that, but it's not related to the settings rule. The settings rule is specific to anyone who receives home and community-based services and what those how those settings are meeting the rule, making sure that people have the most basic rights in place. So if a person has to move in a disaster from Mississippi to Idaho to be with family, and they can access HCBS in that move, if that is something that happens for them, then the same ideas around settings and how people are able to get into the community, how their civil rights are not impacted or impacted, as the case may be, would be the same. It isn't really relevant to the specifics of the settings rule.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs. We have, sorry, excuse me, another question from an anonymous attendee, which says, I worked for a shady care provider a couple years ago. Is there any way to anonymously turn them in for bad practices? I believe this is directed towards anybody.
Well, I'll go ahead and answer that. If you feel like a provider that you work for is shady, and you are familiar with the settings rule, you go read about the settings rule and you feel like, wow, they're violating this, then I would say reach out to your Center for Independent Living, reach out to your, your SILC, reach out to April and say, I'm concerned about this. I've looked at the settings rule. Can you help me look at this? And then it's something that could be made known, about that provider. I don't want to get into particulars of shady, not shady, what that actually means. We're talking about, if you have concerns that there are entities that are violating the settings rule, then this process that we're talking about, advocacy to bring it forward, this is exactly the way you would do it.
Another question came in from Misty Dion with regards to the HCBS settings rule and guardianship interference with real consumer input in their person-centered plan and consumer choice on where they prefer to live, not in a nursing home or assisted living, but a community setting. How can CILs assure the consumer has input at the fullest extent possible?
So part of the settings rule, one of the elements is, did this individual actually have choice in where they live? Okay, so if they're in an HCBS environment and they are in an assisted living, did they really have choice in this? Were they given all the information they need? Did they get informed choice? If a person is living in a group home, how did this person choose this home? What sort of process is involved around creating person-centered plans? And how does informed choice play a role in that? So that is the settings rule, yes, looks at those things. When we go out, we take a look and look at person-centered plans. The biggest way that people are getting informed choice is through a solid person-centered planning process. And having information that comes to them through advocates, through activists, in particular, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people who are aging that maybe have never been involved in this. They just got older and now they need support. Those are the areas where it's important that CILs, that you all get involved and you make sure that the informed part of informed choice comes from you.
Before we close out, any other questions? I did want to read out, we had a great chat from Erica McFadden, which is, moving forward, as you think about the spaces your organization is in and what the commissioner has said, what more can be done to advocate for independent living in HCBS? Starting with the HCBS settings rule and even beyond with your state's transition plans, are there specific actions your organization can take? Who else needs to be at the table in your state when it comes to HCBS advocacy and enforcing the settings rule? Who do you need to make stronger connections with to ensure that IL is represented in every space involving disability as it applies to HCBS? Have you met with your area agency on aging, for example, where a number of older adults are not aware of their rights? How can you start with your own consumers? If any are receiving HCBS services from providers, for example, day programs, residential programs, job sites, have you talked to them about what their lives are like in these settings? Are they aware of what their rights are? Are their families, friends, and allies aware? I just wanted to make sure that got read out. As we're getting ready to close, I also want to ask that everybody here take the evaluation. It will be linked in as you close out of the webinar today. You will see a link to the evaluation for today's webinar. We really love to hear your feedback on what we shared here today. And also, this is just the first part of this work. We will have a part 2 of this session and a couple further conversations around this work. So make sure to keep an eye out for that going forward. Any last things anybody wants to share or say before we close out for today? All right, thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you all again soon.